So, Anne Gambles, you're going to talk about cross-institutional community of practice of community of practice. I'm intrigued. Tell
I
us
am.
more.
Thank you, Tony. So, hello, I'm Anne Gambles. I'm very pleased to be here today. Thank you for inviting me. I'm a senior manager for change and agility at the Open University, and I lead our systems thinking in practice community of practice, or our STiP COP. Some of you might recognise this work that I'm going to present today from a talk that I gave at the SysPrac 25 conference in September last year. But today I'm not just revisiting it, I'm going to share how it's evolving. So hopefully that's changed for you.
It has.
Okay, bear with me a second. So yeah, this talk is a continuation of our work growing systems thinking in practice at the Open University through a long-lived systemic inquiry or systemic co-inquiry. And it's led us to a new question: how might communities of practice extend their learning beyond organisational boundaries? And I'll be exploring an emerging direction, so a community of practice of communities of practice, or COP of COPs, not as a model, but more as an inquiry into how we might strengthen shared learning across contexts and what that might make possible. And in other words, what happens when communities of practice try to learn with and from each other across organisational boundaries? So the Open University STiP COP was relaunched in March 2025, and we're running it as a long-lived systemic co-inquiry. At its heart is a simple question: how might we grow systems thinking in practice together? And from the outset, we've treated the community of practice as both a community of practice and the object of our co-inquiry. So we've been using the COP not just as a place to practice systems thinking, but as a system to learn from in its own right. And it can perhaps be seen as a living case study. So who are we? Well, we're an ensemble of colleagues from across the Open University and also beyond the Open University. We have a mailing list of external contacts to whom we invite to some of our sessions. And we comprise academic and professional colleagues united by curiosity, systemic sensibilities, and an interest in making sense of complexity. So we bring different perspectives, different methods and tools, and share a willingness to explore, question, and learn together. And we have an ability to turn diagrams, dilemmas, divergent thinking into unexpectedly lively conversation, often over lunchtime. Our sessions are usually over lunchtime, not always, but usually. We meet around once a month, and over the last year, we've had just under 50% of the members of the community attending at least one session, and around 20% have attended more than one. Typically, we have around 10 colleagues attend each session, and we've had noticeably more if the speaker's an academic or perhaps an external practitioner. So how does it work? How does the STiP COP work? Well, we've aimed to create a space that's safe and reflective, where members are encouraged to think differently, and where they don't have to justify systems thinking itself. And as well as our sessions, which typically happen in teams online, but we have had one face-to-face session last summer. As well as those spaces, we also have a team space and a Viva Engage channel where we advertise our sessions and share resources and encourage conversation. We are transdisciplinary, so we're bringing together people from different roles, different perspectives. all OU colleagues are welcome to join. And as I said before, we have a mailing list of external contacts. We are very much practice-based. Our conversations are grounded in real organisational contexts and situations and problems. For example, we've been exploring governance and change and interdependencies within the Open University. And we've been using systems thinking in practice to grow our systems thinking in practice. We started in March 25 with our relaunch session with an introduction to the core systems thinking in practice ideas. So engaging with multiple perspectives, understanding interrelationships, and reflecting on boundary judgments. And then we've workshopped over the year using approaches like rich pictures and PQR and CAPWA analysis to help build a shared understanding of our situation and purpose as a community of practice. And importantly, we've designed our sessions and the community in such a way that people who are perhaps new or newer to systems thinking in practice, so that they can start applying STiP in small ways straight away. So take things away from the sessions and use them themselves in their situations. So next slide just illustrates a rich picture that we created together and that we've iterated on during the year, including quite recently, just to work this up a little bit more. So that just gives you a feel for how we view ourselves as a community of practice. So it is highlighted in the yellow, with the yellow shading, within the Open University as a system and the wider system within which we exist. And this next slide just illustrates the intended outcomes that we're aiming to have as a community. This is the same pretty much as the slide that I presented back in September. And we've seen some movement on these. We are a growing network of practitioners. We have grown in numbers since we relaunched in March, and beyond where we were at in September too. We've now got just over 200 members. I think in September we might have had about 190 or so. And I'll talk a bit more about outcomes and learnings that we're seeing in a moment. So the Open University Systems Thinking Community of Practice, and how is it evolving? Well, we've been experimenting with different types of sessions, bringing in speakers on a range of topics, asking for feedback and reflecting on what happens. We spent probably around the first 6 months doing rich picturing and PQR analysis and looking at our values and that sort of thing. And then in the most recent 6 months, we've been inviting in a range of speakers, so including internal academics and external practitioners. We've had a slight shift. And over time, through the use of soft systems methodology, we've been developing an iterative sense-making and learning process of trying new things, reflecting on our experiences and feedback, and adapting what we've been doing. So it's not a static community. We see this as very much an evolving system of inquiry where both our practice and the community itself continue to develop over time. And I should mention that as we've gone along, we've been putting together a systems thinking community of practice handbook, which contains details of our purpose and the artifacts that we've developed along the way. So our PQR analysis and that rich picture are in there. And we've also created slides in our handbook. It is a PowerPoint based handbook that illustrate the sessions that we've run during the year and provide links to the materials that are associated with them, so that our COP members have got a kind of easy reference to go back to, and indeed if they've missed a session, they can easily navigate to the materials and the recording and so on. And along the way, we had a mid-year review couple of weeks after the SCiP conference, so kind of halfway through, a bit of a pit stop, looked at where we got to, and then we've recently, in March this year, had an end of year review as well. What are we learning as a community of practice? Well, at the end of our first year, we're seeing signs of developing systemic capability and increased confidence, particularly among our newer practitioners. Our people are becoming more comfortable engaging with complexity, uncertainty, organisational change, so they say themselves. And I think we can observe kind of richer conversations about purpose and boundaries and change within the community as we've gone on, kind of anecdotally. So we're not just learning new methods, but we're developing our ability to see and engage systemically. And secondly, we're learning that capability develops through shared practice, practice-based experiences. And we've been developing and revisiting our rich picture and our PQR analysis together, and that's become a way of surfacing different perspectives and noticing what's missing, deepening our understanding and of the wider system that we're part of. And we've seen a strong demand for case study based sessions and drop-in sessions, and an interest in storytelling, and acknowledgement that learning happens through engaging with real situations, reflecting together. So learning is a social activity within the community. And we're seeing the community itself as an important relational learning environment. So I think similar to what we've mentioned on the SCiO introductory slides at the beginning, we're a community that helps reduce isolation for those who are interested in systems thinking, and we can see a sense of belonging developing. And we've noticed that different participation modes are valued, so people engage in different ways. Some contribute actively, others learn by listening in sessions or watching recordings, and all of that is recognised as being a valid and important way of participating. We have had some members who've attended pretty much every session, but they're literally a handful of people. And there was one comment that was made at our end of review that really stayed with me, which is, thank you for letting me just quietly digest and think and learn. And so we're seeing systemic capability being developed collectively through participation, shared practice, and quiet personal thinking and interaction. And there's clearly something valuable happening. We're seeing a growing confidence, shared learning, developing capability, but at the same time, we're also encountering some limitations and tensions. So the community works as a local learning space, but you can see that its impact from feedback from our members, its impact isn't perhaps spreading as easily across the university as we might like it to. Systems thinking is still in pockets and engagement is uneven. Capability is developing, but perhaps not yet diffusing across team and unit boundaries. And perhaps this is a reflection of how the environment can limit how far learning can be applied. So the broader organisational context perhaps is there shaping what's possible. And as a university, we have seen some pressures over the last year around efficiencies and cost cuttings, efficiency savings, cost cuttings. And so perhaps colleagues have had more limited space than perhaps in other years for stepping back and questioning purpose and focusing on their STiP. And we can see some other constraints around, people being able to see the system and what's going on, but perhaps not feeling as though they've got agency to make any changes. So there's sometimes a gap perhaps between what people are learning and what they're able to do with it in their learnings in practice. And community members have acknowledged that understanding the OU as a system still feels quite limited. And that's one of our key outcomes that we're aiming for. So we're only in the early stages of where we're at, really. And that last point perhaps points to a broader tension. We're building systemic capability, we're on that journey, but that doesn't automatically translate into systemic influence. So the question becomes not just how capability develops, but how it connects into the wider system. So we're creating something valuable. The community of practice is working as a learning environment, but its impact is currently bounded, perhaps at least somewhat by organisational structures and by reach and the limits perhaps of a single community. And so there's an emerging question, and it's a question that I opened with. So what happens when communities of practice try to learn with and from each other across organisational boundaries? So an emerging direction is what we're calling, or can perhaps be called, a community of practice of communities of practice. Not as a model or a defined structure, but as a way of thinking about how learning might connect across contexts, across different organisational contexts, perhaps. So rather than scaling, or maybe as well as scaling, a single community of practice, we could ask, what if multiple communities of practice were connected as part of a wider learning system? And this focus shifts from growing capability within a community of practice to learning between communities of practice, perhaps across different organisations. And thinking about that, we could maybe suggest some tensions which have yet to be explored. This is all very early thinking, and we've only just started thinking about this as a community. The question has only recently emerged, I guess, and we've yet to talk about it very much as a community. So this is new, and yeah, I'd be really grateful for your thoughts on this. But yeah, how to connect communities of practice without perhaps over designing or constraining them. So thinking about autonomy versus coordination. And then, yeah, coherence versus diversity. So how we might share learning while preserving the uniqueness of each context of each community of practice. And then how might we sustain this COPs without creating additional layers of work or complexity? So tension between energy versus overhead. And that's it. I've finished with, yeah, I'd really welcome your reflections and thoughts and challenges, or perhaps you've had similar experiences elsewhere. Yeah, particularly interested to see if any of you have experience of where learning has moved across boundaries or not.